So welcome back to All Things EDI, the podcast where we explore the people, the stories and lived experience that shape a truly inclusive world. I'm your host, Yasmin Damree-Ralph, EDI Manager, and today's episode is a celebration of South Asian Heritage Month. This year's theme is Roots to Roots, a powerful reflection on the journeys of South Asian communities from deep cultural roots to many routes taken across continents and generations. We're honouring the legacies, struggles and vibrant contributions that contribute and shape today's society. Whether you're reconnecting with your own heritage or expanding your understanding as an ally, this episode is for you. We'll be exploring identity, migration, belonging through the lens of lived experience and community pride. So settle in, join us as we trace paths from roots to roots and celebrate the richness of South Asian Heritage Month. Today I have the wonderful Priti Joshi. Hi Priti.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me here
You're
today.
welcome. A passionate advocate for South Asian representation, for her job role and inclusion. So Priti, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you've already said I'm Priti Joshi. I grew up in Mumbai, actually came here after getting married. A man I didn't know from a newspaper ad, actually. Really makes for a really interesting story. But he was just right for me, and we've been married 33 years. We have 2 adult children. I have had a journey into my role, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as we go along. But yeah, I am lead social worker for the perinatal mental health service. I manage the social workers within the team, and it's a fabulous place to work.
Wow, such a lot to talk about and to really understand and know about you, I think. So, listeners, grab your favourite drink or your lunch, listen on your earpods, iPhone, whatever it is, and let's get into it. So this month, I think it's from the 18th of July to about the 17th of August, we're celebrating South Asian Heritage Month. And I think it's a month that actually, although it's becoming more and more popular, I don't think it's as widely celebrated as I would have liked or do like, I think. Because, you know, you have Black History Month and there's a massive push for that one.
Yeah.
And I think some of my struggles is we have a lot of South Asian. I mean, what was it, last year? We did a whole drive in India for nurses.
Recruitment, yeah.
And I think that celebration, we kind of do it quietly, not as explosive. And I think I really would like to do something as explosive as building that up and getting people to actually open up to me as well. I think they do it one-to-one, but not kind of as I would like it or as I'd want it. So as I said, the theme is Roots to Roots. So let me start there with you in terms of who you are and your upbringing, your roots.
It's really interesting. It's my dad's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday, Dad.
Dad died 31 years ago. But my defining influences are my parents. Mm-hmm. So my dad was 50 when I was born.
Right.
He was a pharmacist. He was the most educated pharmacist in the whole of Asia. And my mum was a geography teacher, a head teacher, a writer. Very, very dynamic. She died in 2023 at age 93. So I've been very, very privileged to have them. I am their eldest. And then I have 2 other siblings. And interestingly, for the very first time in the 33 years I've been in this country, my brother and his wife have visited me.
Oh.
They are here at the moment. So that is just, I don't know, something special, I think. Mm-hmm. But I grew up in a family that was very Orthodox Hindu. So religion played a big part in all of it, in how we were raised, in what we were allowed to do, what we were not allowed to do. Never had a boyfriend, and never tried meat or eggs. It influenced absolutely everything. But I think culturally, we were already quite a mix. So my father was a visiting professor at the Royal College of Pharmacy here. So I grew up in mother care clothes and Reader's Digest. So actually, not a typical Indian girl. But I had a very charmed lifestyle for the first 15 years. And then we had some financial difficulties. And that was the time when I learned a lot about what makes people. And you cannot buy personality off a shelf. Mm-hmm. And that's why I probably remain a fierce advocate of people whose voices are not heard, and how do we bring them so that they can be amplified? How do we facilitate so we can access people's thoughts and what they want to be rather than what we think they ought to be? So I guess, I was a nerd. I was a very, very good student, very good girl. Nothing to report there, but absolutely rubbish at Indian singing, absolutely rubbish at art, and absolutely rubbish at dancing. I've got 2 left feet. What I've recognised is all of those things really put me in a very good place where people are seen as lacking something in services. And I guess it actually helps me build a rapport straight away with people. So, I went to school sort of up the road. I went to college up the road. My mum could hear the bell go off in the college. If I wasn't home in 10 minutes, she would tell me who I was out with. It was terrible. I never left home. And I can still remember I left home for the first time when I was 21, when I'd got my job in the bank. I was a banker for a while. And I cried every night. All the guys laughed at me. We are still friends, sort of almost 40 years later. But they all laughed because I just cried every night for Mum. And I guess, it was a very sheltered upbringing, I think, in lots of ways. Felt very safe. If I was loitering, the head teacher would know because a neighbour who had seen me would tell them. And they would have also told my mum. So then the head teacher would give me a good old smack with a ruler as I got to school. And the mother would give me a smack when I got home. Nobody asked any questions. What happened? What were you struggling with? But it felt safe. It felt safe, and it felt as if people cared about you. And I guess I still miss that after 33 odd years in this country. I still miss that.
It's funny you say that because I'm born and bred here. I'm not South Asian. My parents are from Mauritius. But it's very similar. Not allowed to have a boyfriend. I mean, I'm not joking. News of what you were doing was faster than the internet. Literally faster than the internet, because that spreaded quicker than you could post something on social media, And my mum and dad actually moved house because where we used to live, there used to be a boys' polytechnic school, secondary school opposite. And my dad was like, I don't want these boys looking at my daughter. I don't want her being influenced by these boys. We have to move.
Yes.
And I had to go to an all-girls school as well.
Me too.
So they moved 5 minutes away from this school. And even then I wasn't allowed to walk to school. My dad would take me or my mum would take me to school because they were so worried about boys and me being influenced because you wasn't allowed to have boyfriends. Although it sounds really strict, but it was a very loving household. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? When you talk about roots and you talk about that culture, there is this perception that although it was a strict upbringing, it was an unloving upbringing. And that's far from the truth. Yes, they had their ways of, I don't want to say punishment, but, consequences, maybe a nicer word.
Yeah.
Whether it was, warranted or not. But it was always very much a loving.
Yes.
And there was very much family orientated. So it's very similar. I think there is a lot of similarities there in terms of how your upbringing, and I can really see some of that in mine, thinking back, when I was growing up. But I grew up in the UK, in South East London.
Yeah.
So it's a cold world between us.
Yes.
But there's that similarity, isn't there? Yeah. That's really interesting. Definitely. I really do think that's interesting.
Do you know one thing you said, and I just want to pick up on that?
Yeah,
you talked about consequences. And I think what people sometimes misunderstand is those were controlling relationships, and they were not. What they were caring, nurturing relationships that wanted the best for you. And it's really interesting because as a Indian mother, I can remember teachers saying, well, you shouldn't be pushy. And I said there's a very big difference between being pushy and scaffolding your child. And it's that little difference that you might put up a little cane for a sapling to grow, supported, or a little wind shelter that you might put up around something so, tender plants are not damaged. And I think people who are looking from outside in don't appreciate actually the context within which these relationships are. So, I think you made a very valid point there, Yasmin.
Yeah, and I think there's also this whole, I think for my parents and probably yours as well, they did what they thought was right at the time. And I think they always, as every parent, wants your child to do better than them.
Yes.
You know, and they want to take away any kind of influence that could derail that in any kind of way. I think my worst one was wasn't actually about boys, to be honest. It was music. And it was, although my dad was really into music, loved it, it was the videos, you know, with these women in scantily clad clothing. And my mum would be like, you can't watch that because you're going to end up looking like that. And I'm not having you wearing those kind of things. I'm thinking, I don't think I could, you know. And I think it wasn't a lack of trust. I think there was they trusted you, but I don't think they trusted the outside world beyond the house.
I agree. Mine was Tina Turner, by the way.
Oh, she's my spirit mum.
Well, yeah, mine too. And my mum used to despair. Because we never got videos, you see. We only got pirated audio cassettes.
Right.
The ones that came undone and you had to sort of use a pencil to roll them. And my mum used to say, oh my goodness, she's screeching again in this house. And I still remember, and she really despaired that, you know, I was listening to Tina Turner. But yeah, I know what you mean about that. Yeah.
We could have a whole conversation about Tina Turner. She is the reason I am blonde. She is the reason I have jean jackets in my wardrobe.
Fantastic.
I have to say, bad influence according to my mum, but great influence for me. But getting back to roots, in terms of that, what helps you? I mean, you said that you were born in Mumbai. You kind of grew up there. But what has helped you stay connected to those roots now when you moved to the UK and now living and raising your own family here and navigating your own life here?
I think some of the values that have been instilled in us. So one of the fundamental things, Yasmin, that I think drives me is service before self.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really hard for people to understand. A very Western concept is about, you know, the shadow side of helping, in particular in social work. This is a big thing. You have to really reflect on, why do I help people? And actually, the way I have grown up, you help for the sake of helping, and you support for the sake of supporting. You don't do it because it fulfills a need in you. But of course, for me, that has happened because, you know, I miss the roles. I miss the roles as daughter, as auntie, as sister, all of that. And, you know, so I do think that, though, that the values, I mean, my mum was a really, really big champion. The school where she was head teacher, there were children who didn't have very much. And I actually didn't go to a private school. My brother and sister did, but I went to a normal school, which is very uncommon in Mumbai. You know, and seeing children without shoes, eating out of aluminium mugs and plates, it did something to me, in addition to the values they instilled. And I remember visiting the Theosophical Society because I was curious about, you know, thought leaders in the world, not just Hinduism, but thought leaders. You know, and I remember reading Dr. Annie Besant when I was probably about 10, 11, and Swami Vivekananda when I was, and his speech in Boston at that sort of age. And it really made me, who am I? How do I want to be in this world? And I guess some of those things combine together. The other bit is, it's actually very easy to be that way within that culture because everybody is like that. If you meet somebody on the street and you're carrying 3 bags, they will say, do you want a hand with one of those? Well, what would happen if you try that over here? I think I'd probably get a really horrible, dirty look.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, the culture in itself, in the wider society, and that is also changing, you know. We have got MTV generation in India too, but I think, you know, it's really so easy to be that person who is motivated to just continue to be useful.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, it's fed into my thought process about who I think I am. And I always think of myself as just a facilitator, just somebody who, you know, it is the bridge that people walk on to get from A to B, rather than being the big I am. And for that reason also, Yasmin, you know, you said we don't actually celebrate much. I have wondered in the past whether we don't talk about ourselves much, because we don't need to, because you don't see that as us doing, whether we just see that as something destined to happen for somebody, us just being fortunate to be able to be
help.
supportive. Yes. Yeah. And I've often sort of reflected on something like that.
That's a good point, actually. Is it because Yeah, is it because you don't see yourselves as these people that actually should celebrate your culture and your heritage instead of just going, actually, this is who we are, but we'll stay quiet because we're happy to help and assist and aid and support rather than putting ourselves in the front of it all. And I absolutely get that. And I say that because when I started this podcast, actually when I was in the thinking processes of it, and and I'm sitting there thinking, this is going to be my voice on there, potentially my face on there if we're filming it. This is me putting myself forward now, because I've always been I've always directed from the background. Even in the allyship training, I've directed it from the background. You guys do that, you're good, I'll sort out everything at the back. Now I'm putting myself forward here, and I don't know if it's comfortable or uncomfortable. I don't know. It's probably because I'm happy to help from the background. You lot be in the front. I'm happy for you to take that light. But now, and actually one of the directors challenged me on that a couple of weeks ago. He heard the first podcast and said, why haven't you made that public? And I was very much, I don't know about that, I'm not sure. And he was like, you need to be bold and you need to be brave and you need to make it, because you've done this. It's you that's done this, nobody else. It's come from your brain. You've manifested it. You've made it happen. So why not? And it took me a minute to actually sit there and think about it. So what you're saying, I think, why not be bold and brave and actually talk about your heritage and all the wonderful enrichedness that you bring to it that actually can educate people, our listeners who are going to be listening maybe for the first time or the second time and thinking, what can I learn here? What can I learn about this that I didn't know? Because I think there is a perception when we talk about South Asian heritage, depending on where you're from, there is stereotypes within it, isn't there? There's always must be a doctor, lawyer, scientist or whatever.
Yes.
Accountant.
Yes.
You have to be one of those.
Money-making professions.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You must make incredible curries. And I remember the first time someone said that to me and I looked at them and thought, I have no clue. I'd probably order it more than make it. You really don't want to touch my cooking. So there's all these kind of stereotypes and you stay quiet and it kind of just festers, doesn't it? But actually there's more to it.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, I'm not South Asian and I don't speak the language. But I grew up with Bollywood films.
Yes.
Asha Bhosle.
Yes.
My favourite actress is Inata Man, Parveen Barbie.
All of those icons,
Beautiful, beautiful women, that you would aspire to. Funny enough, my mum was okay watching those women, in very little outfits.
Yes.
That was fine. But, that Indian culture circled around, but that shouldn't be just all that I know about it. Or anybody should know about it. There's a lot more, isn't there?
There is. And I think culture is what you make of it. I guess one of the things that I've often reflected on as a social worker is, culture's done differently, not just within a nation or a space, but also within a people, so within the people of the country, but also the people as they've migrated. A lot of people have migrated from India to Mauritius to Africa, all over the world. And those people will, like you've pointed out, will have similarities, but they'll have other differences.
Yeah.
And if we take everybody to be the one, then we miss the subtle spaces where, we can celebrate the differences. And I agree with you entirely. Something I learned when I became the chair of the Ethnic Minority Forum in Medway, we set up, I was the very first steering group chair of what was Rethink Hope project. We got £600,000 from lottery funding to set up a bespoke mental health service for people from Asian communities because they were not coming to KMPT at the time. And, the ideas were there because I knew what it felt like to be unsupported, for people not to understand what you were going through, to have those gaps in the relational stuff that you can't build over here. You cannot become somebody's daughter or somebody's auntie. Nobody cares. I remember my neighbour saying, if I knock on the door and I say to you, how are you doing today? I don't want to hear a whole story. I'm expecting I'm okay, how are you? In India, I am still friends with my next door neighbours. We've grown up together and that's almost 60 years, okay? I'll be 60 next year. if I didn't tell them what was going on with me, they would take offense and say, what's happened to our relationship? And these are fundamental cultural differences that if we don't pay attention to, we miss when we work with the sort of people that we work with. This is why when I've had students from diverse backgrounds, I tend to look at supervision templates that are different, that may perhaps address some of those needs in different ways. But I guess, these are all processes that we need to think about. We really need to think about what does it do to a person when you migrate, whether that's a physical migration or even when people are living with people with different cultures. I mean, my children are very different to me. They're very firmly British. We're celebrating our son's engagement, and his partner is, she is half Welsh, half Scottish. So no Indian traits at all. But, the culture is fairly similar in terms of the family-oriented nature of their culture. So then how do we sort of negotiate those spaces that are not the same or similar? And I guess, it brings a bigger, richer understanding of a person, and the knowledge and the understanding brings tolerance and acceptance. And I guess not saying that people should tolerate each other or have a right to, be accepting of others or not. I guess what I'm saying is it makes for a more cohesive place, whether it's at work, whether it's in society, in the world, whichever way you look at it. And that's probably why, Yasmin, also, being that way inclined, I've ended up, following Jainism. I follow the tenets of Jainism because I find the faith incredibly kind and compassionate. And there's a bit about it, we do compassion-focused therapy. But I guess I've learned how to be compassionate to myself for wanting different things and being sad that I can't meet it. And then thinking about, now how can I use that experience with people who are feeling that sadness? I do not get very many DNAs, Yasmin. Would you believe that? It's really interesting when I leave messages on duty on a phone, people tend to call back. And I wonder, how can we do this with each other then? So we do lean into those spaces that are more common and then celebrate the differences. I don't know, but definitely the upbringing has really directed me towards service before self, as I said.
Yeah, definitely. And that question, as you were talking, that was coming to my head was, so how have you navigated the routes that you had in India? You migrated to England, having to navigate a completely different culture in England, because it wouldn't have been the same as in Mumbai. No. And that's down to not just people, but the weather, the food, absolutely everything, just the way of life, everything. And sometimes, holding on to that so much so it doesn't get diluted or it doesn't disappear. How have you navigated that? But also raising your own family and trying to instill some of those legacy roots into them so they then carry that heritage through to their families when they eventually have them.
It's a very wide question, isn't it? Let me start with perhaps the weather, because that's what we do, isn't it, in this country. I was really hard work. I can remember wearing 2 or 3 layers of clothing and sitting under a duvet, because we didn't even have central heating when I first came here. And where I came, I went to southeast London, where there were more dark faces than there were white faces. And I sort of thought my idea of Britain was reading Enid Blyton and all the stories from Yorkshire Moors. And I'm thinking, okay, this doesn't really add up. Where have I come to? I have no idea. And it's really interesting you say that, because, Yasmin, the weather was the easiest part, because somebody once said to me, you carry a cardigan and you carry an umbrella and you're more or less covered. And I sort of have adopted that with everything in my life. So what does my cardigan and my umbrella look like in each situation is how I look at things. And the food is one thing. I've never, ever eaten meat, but I've also maintained one thing. For my meat-eating friends, my meat-eating relatives, I've learned to cook. I actually didn't know that, sausage was pig meat. I didn't know that. I remember going into a shop to buy a bottle of champagne for my husband, because he'd done really well. And I had to ask advice because I had no idea what it meant. And I remember it was wasted on me, a lovely platter of blue cheese and grapes and champagne. And I thought, "Oh, that stinks. I'm not having that stuff." But, it's really interesting because, I grew up in a very, very affluent family. Gold, silver, diamonds, pearls, big homes, all of that. And then to come here with £10 in my pocket and nothing to my name. And I can still remember a leading bank would not open my bank account, even because I wouldn't take money from my husband. I didn't know him, remember. I was still building my relationship. They wouldn't open my bank account because I didn't have a regular income. But they would give me a credit card. And I couldn't work that bit out. And I thought, you'd get me into debt. What a load of nonsense is that? And I wouldn't do that. But I think, going back to that bit about what's my cardigan and what's my umbrella. And so, I have learned to cook for them, but I have remained a vegetarian. And I remind myself, if ever I feel a little bit sort of, I'm better than you, which is very rare, I remind myself that I'm a vegetarian because I've known no other way to be. I haven't made a moral decision to do that. I have a lot of time for people who decide for themselves this is the path for them. So that part I cannot take credit for. But that's what I've stuck to. So my children will eat a cow mooing on a plate, and I'm okay with that. What's happened eventually is they are so considerate that they clean their own dishes. Both my children have learned to cook really well, and they will cook the meat and won't let me do it anymore because they're adults now. But it's interesting what happens when I don't pull, but I just let go, isn't it? And that was a journey, and that wasn't always easy, neither was it comfortable. So, that's the food element of it. I guess the other bit was about how do I raise my children? And one of the biggest differences, I guess, between myself and my in-laws and their way of thinking is religion didn't play a big part in their lives. There was no temple in the home, whereas it's unheard of in Indian Hindu homes, they're not having a temple. So I guess I sort of thought to myself, how will I negotiate what is a very integral part of me? My moral compass comes from here. And I thought to myself, okay, so this is right for me and I need it. And what I said to my children is, I serve you a buffet. From here, what you will take will be yours to have. What I absolutely think is a non-negotiable is thoughtfulness and kindness for others. And I can still remember my son when he had his very first, he's a lawyer, the older one is a lawyer, he had been taken out by some bankers in London because they had signed a deal. And he messaged me to say, Mum, they have got a £3,000 bottle of wine. And I'm so thinking about the people who are sitting outside on the streets, hungry and thirsty. And for me, that was marks out of 10 for my parenting. And similarly, when my second son at 15, who is a doctor today, he said to me one day, he was in a grammar school, and he said, Mum, I might be angry today or I might be sad. And I said, what happened, son? And he said, some of the children have signed a petition against a teacher who was from a different country because she has a different way of teaching. And I think that's bullying. I think they should be sitting down with her, talking to her and saying, this doesn't serve us. And I said to him, so why would you be angry or sad? He said, because I'm certain. He said, I'm the only one who hasn't signed the petition out of 185 children. And I looked at him and my eyes welled up, and the only thought was that Gandhi was thrown off the train and it changed his life. And I thought to myself, we need leaders in thoughts like that. You need thought leaders who understand the value of wrong is wrong, doesn't matter who does it, and doesn't matter why they've done it. Wrong is wrong. How can we be gentle with everybody? I don't have to like everything.
No.
But I have to be kind. And I guess that's how I've negotiated. So interestingly, Yasmin, they come home for all Hindu festivals, along with their partners. Neither of them are Indian or Hindu. I obviously also follow Jainism, so they respect my dietary needs, which also now includes no root vegetables and honey, etc. So I'm even harder to feed, but they still cater for me. So I wonder, can we be kinder? How do we create kinder worlds? Can we just let go? And then what does that look like? So yeah, that's possibly what I think has really guided me in terms of some of the most important roles and some of the most important things in my life.
That's really interesting. I think because Very interesting. I could listen to you all day on that one, I think, because there is, again, this misconception about people from India. And what you have been speaking about is a way of life that you have been instilled in growing up, that it doesn't get spoken about at all. And I think for anybody to hear that, I think should trigger something in them in terms of going, I didn't know that about Indian people. Not all people, but I didn't know that. That is a way of life. That's a way of being.
Yes.
Rather than a choice of being. Because you don't know any different.
No.
That's what, your parents have instilled in you. That's what you've carried on. That's what you've done to your families. And I think, when I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stereotypes here. And there is a lot of them, isn't there? Yes. Arranged marriages.
Yes.
And there's this whole thing of a misconception. Arranged marriage is a forced marriage and no one has a say in it. And I think, and you see, some of the stories out there, and some of the police forces do have a forced marriage unit. And no matter how many times I try to explain it, they're two different things.
Yeah, they are.
But it doesn't connect for some reason, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I think, it's really important to understand a couple of things. So where the culture can be very protective, it can be oppressive in some places, and you've got the green gang perhaps in some rural villages where ladies go together to use the facilities outdoors because there is a very high incidence of rape perhaps. But what we are missing, because the Western world is so focused on there is all this oppression of women, they're missing the bit that the women have formed the green gang. They are unable to see this bit. And I guess this is something that, for me, with a mum like I've had, as dynamic as she was, I am automatically strengths-based. I'm automatically looking at where are the strengths. I don't look at people, perhaps, some of my experiences with people on the autistic spectrum, where people tend to list things that people can't do. Well, for me, nature has a way of balancing that with other things. And can I actually shift the gaze, move the spotlight to where the strengths are, and then what people's aspirations may be about their life? And you change the whole picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
And perhaps, again, that's why, I'm a systemic practitioner. I work in the spaces between people. I've done a lot of mediation as well. And I guess, that resolves things. It keeps families together. It actually builds bridges. It doesn't destroy and pull apart. And I guess for me, that is really significant.
Yeah.
And not because I want it, but because people want it. I mean, something like open dialogue that KMPT now has. I mean, I'm really wedded to the idea because I have a lived experience within my family of, schizophrenia. And, we continue to do that. And it was only yesterday my brother-in-law said, thank you for continuing to engage with my wife. And I said, well, there is no choice. She's family. That's what you do. But I guess people don't see those aspects of Indian people. They only see what they can see with their eyes when they go as tourists to a country they will never understand. I cannot claim to understand the whole country, and definitely not as it has evolved. So it requires a humility to see that I can never know. I can only see with the eyes I have got, with the equipment I have got. And I guess I understand where you're coming from. I've done a lot of work with the police as well, when we had communal riots in Medway. And I can remember saying to them, we had a massive big public meeting. I would chair the meetings for the Ethnic Minority Forum. There were 80 people in that meeting. And I remember one of the police superintendents saying to me, what are you saying, Priti? What are you saying? What are you saying? And he said it 3 times. Now, I don't think I have an accent. And I am speaking in English. So I looked at him and I thought, I'm not going to let it go, but I am going to answer in the way that I would answer, not the way you deserve to be answered. And so I said to him, Richard, I think I'm speaking in your language, and I don't think I have an accent. So if you need me to actually unpick it a little bit, I'm more than happy to do it. But I don't think that was difficult to understand. And I guess this is the bit, Yasmin, in the services we work in. We need to be passionate about how we show respect.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And that's why I'm committed to the allyship. That's why I'm committed to the EDI bit within the perinatal service and have been nominated as EDI lead for the service because, if we don't stand up, my husband once said, I debated about being the lead for the Ethnic Minority Forum, and he said something really wise, and he said, if you choose not to lead, you are choosing to be led by lesser leaders than yourself. And that has stayed for me. That has been about 20 years ago, and I've never forgotten those words. And I've always asked myself, well, am I going to lead from the front then or not? And, COVID was a very big example. Some of my colleagues from Africa felt really threatened by the vaccination program and the compulsory vaccination. And some of the conversations I had were very much about, well, you lead us out of home and my children will be homeless, I will be jobless. And but I was able to lean into the space that was their pain.
Yeah.
And to say, I am so sorry that feels like that. I will advocate for you to have a non-patient facing role. But this is something I cannot do anything about because it's a national directive, which they then withdrew anyway. But what I mean is, we have got those bifurcation points in life, in relationships. How do we lean into those spaces that feel kind is the only way for me to be.
Yeah.
And that I can definitely say are my roots.
Yeah,
that,
definitely.
KMPT has employed, really.
Yeah. I think kindness it's not hard.
No.
It's not difficult. It should be a way of life. And I have to say, it's something I try to do every day. Not intentionally, but just. And that comes from my dad. Because I would always say he was a walking angel. And I think the one thing that he said to me is, if somebody is unkind to you, don't mirror that back.
No.
Just keep treating them with kindness.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And sometimes it's very hard because it can test you.
Yes.
We're not saints. It can test you, and you
course.
can get a bit spiky with it as well. But you try to lead in that kind of way. And I think the many people that I've met from the South Asian continent have always shown kindness. Has never shown any form of disrespect. Even when I was in school, my core set of friends were from India or Indian. So it was something that I was the only one that wasn't. And going back to my parents being strict, they were strict, but I was allowed to do what I wanted. In terms of, I could cut my hair.
Yes.
I could wear makeup. I could wear whatever clothes that was okay for them to wear. As long as I went to school and learned, it didn't matter. Whereas they weren't allowed to do that.
Yes.
That was kind of the difference between us. But there was never any disrespect in terms of any of it, even from their parents. I mean, every time I went to their houses, it was always, I need to feed you.
Food, yes.
And I was like, you don't really need to feed me. It's fine. Not that I didn't like the food. It's just I knew I had to go home and eat too. So I didn't want to have 2 dinners. But I did like some of their food too. And I know one of the mums did try to teach me. I need to teach you to make roti.
Right.
And I was like, please don't. Please don't. I was scared of cooking. So I was like, please don't. I don't want to. But my friend all did it. So it was something. It was a good childhood to have. Like you said, I grew up in Southeast London, so very multicultural. So it was kind of immersed around me and in my household too. I mean, we spoke a lot about roots and stuff, and there has been talk. We've kind of bordered on representation and belonging, and I think belonging is something that we as a trust are definitely advocating on. Everyone needs to have that sense of belonging and feeling valued and all of that. I think when we talk about belonging and we talk about bringing your whole self, when you say, when we talk about South Asian people, yourself, should I say, you're more likely to serve than to be up front.
Yeah.
That sense of service is always there. How does belonging become part of that? Because people will see you and you're paving the way for the next generation behind you, and they will want to feel a sense of belonging. And I think each generation has a different view of what sense of belonging means. And still staying true to culture, true to root, true to heritage. How does that belonging become part of that? Because they're looking at you to pave that way.
Do it's a really interesting question, but I think also quite a complex one in lots of ways. As I said, culture's how one interprets culture, isn't it? So the easy bits are perhaps the music, the food, the dance, the festival. Those are the easy bits. but the moral compass that one comes with, through some of the cultural. I mean, I would still stand up to let an elderly person sit. But there's also a mark of respect for somebody who may be positioned higher than myself. So there is an automatic humility. And people misinterpret that as they look at me and think perhaps I'm timid. My children will tell you, don't cross my mum about us, because then she's a Rottweiler. And nothing against Rottweilers, but, that's what their view is. And I think it's the same when I advocate for our patients, Yasmin. In terms of how do we carry it on, let's look at the sense of belonging. I mean, what does belonging look like? One of the things I learned here is what is valued in our culture back home is loyalty to somewhere, although that is also changing. So people are not just taken on and dumped here, there and everywhere. People are part of decision-making processes. People are consulted and sometimes not really, they're heard, but, they don't actually, their views may not be incorporated within the decision. But do we have the luxury of not doing that is what I'm trying to say, We don't. We don't have the luxury of that. If you're going to go all the way to India, there'll be an element where people will come for economic migration. They will come for betterment. But I know from when I was doing the open dialogue training and the foreign nurses that were there, do you know what they appreciated was me going over, saying, where are you from, what you do? And I know they all have buddies as well. That's how I found out, But I guess it's a face like theirs in senior positions.
Yes.
Don't tell me that doesn't work. But there are glass ceilings. There is no way, forget about somebody from India, but also somebody who's a social worker who's ever going to get to that sort of level. Where I am sitting there making strategic decisions, although I've done all of that in my role. And I guess you've got to have faces that match as well. Yes. And those faces are also humble enough to understand. I'll give you a good example. When I worked in the hospice as a palliative care social worker, they sent me to work with this lady who was from India, Sikh lady. She had migrated to Africa. She'd begun to eat meat. I was the wagging finger telling her she had sinned. I was the wrong person to go and work with her. The best person to work with her was my Zimbabwean colleague. We need really tight supervision that tells me, what about this? Not the tokenistic stuff that says every 6 weeks you do this. No, it's the real tight supervision that says, what about this is you? What is bleeding into this bit that is stopping you from enabling people to belong in a space that is your team?
Yeah.
And I think that comes from top down and bottom up both ways. That does need to happen from top down. If you don't go and spend a day with somebody, I mean, just today, finding parking, we saw how hard it was for frontline people to find parking. But then you're expecting them to go in, out, in, out, in, out. Unless you know that, I'm not saying provide parking, but unless you know that, you can't then, and you won't then just rely on the stats.
Yeah.
And these are the subtle things that will make a difference to people. People on the wards, I don't want to say to them, we'll have a behavioural approach to processing what you're thinking about. Actually, I want to say, what is the mess that is here for you? Tell me. Now tell me what that looks like. I mean, I do a lot of reflective practice across the service. And this is the reason why I get success, because it isn't a dumping ground. Actually, it's a processing of what is going on for you.
Yeah.
And why is it going on? And then saying, well, what would you like me to do about it, if anything? But it's people being part of decision-making processes and people being really genuinely heard. I always say, listen to listen. Don't listen to talk.
Yeah,
because people can tell the difference, can't they?
Oh, absolutely. You listen with fascination, not listen for solution or to find what the catch is or anything. And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of representation. And one of my things I've always had in my saying is, when I look up, I want to see a reflection.
Yes.
Because at the moment, all I'm doing is looking down. And when you look down, you miss what could be.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Definitely.
So I do get that, and I completely understand that bit. And I think the more people believe in themselves to move up, that's only a good thing. And that's not moving anybody out the way.
No.
Everyone has a space at the right time. But it's also you're paving the way for those future leaders.
Yes.
Because they're the ones that are looking up.
Yes.
And they're also looking up and observing treatment. They're also observing, are you being entertained, i.e. just given a seat at the table, or are you actually being included in the conversation? So there is that. And I think you touched on allies, and I think allies can help get you there. They have a part to play. So before we end, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to reconnect with their roots while navigating life in KMPT or in England, trying to hold on to, trying to actually bring the two together so they can live cohesively together without diluting one or the other? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. You know, again, that's fairly complex. And why wouldn't it be complex? Because human beings are complex. But I think, you know, really important to understand what masks can I tolerate and where do I need to be authentic. You know, again, I will cite the example of palliative care. Somebody who was dying would know if I was disingenuous. They would know I was lying. And so, you know, or I was just putting up a front. And I guess it's what people are comfortable with being. So that doesn't just rely on KMPT and what KMPT provides. It also relies on what histories people are bringing. But can we create spaces for those histories to be shared, Yasmin? You know, some of the work in Medway that I've done through art, through poetry, through weaving tapestry, through having little bits of, what shall I call, patchwork, where teams, people put together pictures. You know, we had a bring something to work day, and a lot of the times people brought, I used to support a carers group in Medway, and they would bring in perhaps a sari they might have seen their grandmother's photographs in, you know, that they had worn for a wedding. You know, can we take time out? Can we afford not to take time out as well? There's a bit about it where we do the meditation, sometimes we do mindfulness, but actually really kind of helping people connect to whoever they are helps them to not have to be who they are not.
Yeah.
Certainly within the workplace. Once I can remember in one of my jobs in local authority, they said, Priti, can you go and tell your colleague there that he smells of the garlic he's probably eaten the other night? And I looked at them and I thought, no, you need to go and do it yourself, if that's offensive. And I remember one of the directors saying, you know, global email saying, why are you not using upstairs? This hall is smelling of fish, because we had a lot of people from the African continent bringing in fish for lunch. And I went in, knocked on the door, and I did say to them, I said, can I share a reflection? I said, you know, why hasn't the email said, what is stopping you from using that space? Are you overworked? Now, you know, that is an orientation, Yasmin. They're not actions, they're orientations. They're orientations to say, I want us to be one.
Yeah.
And unless that orientation comes from top down, I don't know. But I am walking alongside you, Yasmin, till I'm here, because I am going to do it. I know what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
I could sense it from day one. Well done you for sticking your neck above the parapet and saying, actually, we need to be doing this. So, you know, yeah, you've got me. You've got me while I'm here.
Thank you so much. So very quickly, if anyone wanted to know more about your network, where you're bringing people together and having those discussions, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, well, they can find me. Do you mean from KMPT, obviously?
Yeah,
isn't it?
KMPT, yeah.
Well, I am in perinatal team.
Yep.
I am on the address book for NHS, so you can find me. There isn't another Priti Joshi about. So there you go, you can find me.
Fab. Well, it's been lovely having this conversation with you. There's so much more we could talk about. And I think what you've brought is an energy and a different perspective around heritage, culture and roots to roots. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for the privilege, Yasmin.
And this podcast has been brought to you by SupaJam. So thank you for listening